You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today is our solstice program. Every year we do this to observe the real scientific solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, where I am, the longest night of the year. In the Southern Hemisphere, the longest day of the year, and then in June it reverses, and they get the longest night and we get the longest day. This is, of course, the period where in the Northern Hemisphere, Hanukkah and Christmas and many, many religious holidays have derived from it and reflected. But we go to the thing itself, the solstice. And today we're going to hear the words of wise women. First, a woman who is a joyful rabbi and a feminist. A second, a woman who is leading a quiet revolution as the first Buddhist monk, not nun, monk in Thailand. And last but hardly least, the woman who, because of her feminism, fights to keep our state separate from religion and religion separate from the state. But first, we need to go inside the headlines. I used to wonder how an intellectual people like the Germans, who loved philosophy and literature, and, for that matter, the Italians, who loved poetry and wine and music, could actually elect and wildly support such dictators as Hitler and Mussolini. Now I know. I watch Donald Trump and his adoring crowds with a chill at the bone. The Frankensteinian Republican Party has for decades invoked this creature by goading their base further and further right. That the creature now may have nothing to do with conservatism is beside the point, just as terrorist acts may have nothing to do with Islam is beside the point. The point is that ideologies become redefined by action. Look, we are winning. Worldwide, female literacy is rising and maternal mortality is falling. Saudi women voted in municipal elections and a few were even elected, although Saudi feminists scoff at this cosmetic change, pointing out that municipal councils are powerless and that women still need male guardians to function and still aren't permitted to drive. Nevertheless, lesbian and gay marriages are a new normal. The environmental agreement reached in Paris, while only a step forward, is a step forward. Canada and, yes, Germany welcomed refugees with open arms. And there's much more. All of the gains are insufficient yet crucial progress. They know they're losing. And the backlash in violence, both speech and action, is toxic. From the bench, a Supreme Court Justice, Scalia, of course, says that African Americans would benefit from a slower track instead of being in schools too advanced for them. How is this man not impeached? Isn't there anybody out there who will start an impeach Scalia movement? Not that the poison is restricted to the United States, to Trump, Cruz, Scalia, and their ilk. Extreme right-wingers Viktor Orban in Hungary and Marine Le Pen in France have been surging in popularity. Poland is in a constitutional crisis caused by its right wing. Modi's government in India has set back that democracy. The so-called Freedom Party in Austria and the Golden Dawn in Greece have neo-Nazi roots. All of them capitalize on fear. People are scared. Of immigrants, of terrorism, of the other now coming onto their home turf the way for centuries the global north has come onto theirs, to colonize economically and militarily. People are scared of the swift rise of the internet and global communications and technology in general. Here at home, the demographics scare them because women, young people, people of color, people who speak different languages, all are increasing in visibility and strength, and this country will look and sound very different in 20 to 30 years. But getting to that moment is going to be a hard slog, because these fears activate the worst in the human psyche, the sexist violence, the racist attacks, the xenophobic poisons. And I, for one, and maybe you, find myself suffering whiplash from the backlash. But it's up to us to roll up our sleeves instead of wringing our hands. It's up to us to persist, to organize, to educate, and to educate without a tone of sneering superiority, which is sometimes really hard. We threaten their ignorance, so we must take care how we proceed. People have a right to feel afraid, but they do not have a right to hate. We need to focus not just on what we're fighting against, but what we're fighting for. We can do this. We need to rise above the relatively minor differences among ourselves and unite against the politics of bigotry, rage, and fear. Feminists, dreamers, Black Lives Matter organizers, disability rights activists, environmentalists, the young and old and gay and straight, and many more, we need to remember we are one family. And that family is facing a long, dark night. But as with the winter solstice, the light will return. We need to hold hands and hold on. And now for my first guest. Rabbi Sharon Brous returns to the program. She's the wonderful woman who says she had no interest in becoming a rabbi until a bewildering weekend in the old city of Jerusalem when she stumbled upon the answers to all of life's questions, but 3 hours later realized that the answers were facile and unconvincing. Still, she determined she would devote her life to grappling with the questions, and so she has. She's been recognized as one of the nation's leading rabbis by Newsweek and the Daily Beast, and among the 50 most influential American Jews by The Forward. And here she is. Sharon, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Robin. It's such an honor to be with you.
It's an honor to have you. And you're such a sane voice. At the moment, I'm so depressed in the wake of all the violence that's taking place domestically and internationally, and everybody else is so depressed too, which seems to boil down to guns and God, And any wisdom, any tikkun, which is, I think, the Hebrew word for healing the world, that you can throw on the subject would be highly welcome.
Well, I have to say there are days when I, too, am despairing. When we are no longer surprised to hear that the people behind the most egregious acts of violence are doing so in the name of God, something is really in crisis in religion. And I know that many people are talking about and writing about how this moment is a moment in which we're seeing a struggle for the soul of Islam. I think this is a moment in which we're seeing a struggle for the soul of all of the world's religions right now.
Yes.
And I mean, this has to be a moment in which we have a real coming to terms with what it means to be people of faith, people who believe in God, who attach themselves to religious and faith traditions. And I believe that this is a moment where religious leaders actually have to stand up to affirm a theology of justice and love, one that's really driven by a commitment to realize the dignity of all of God's children. And if we don't, we are part of the problem.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I often talk about a frame of reference in trying to solve problems. And if you have a frame of reference, however shaky, you can argue, you can dialogue, you can converse. But when you're dealing with someone or someone's plural who believe that their acts are directly following they have a personal line, to the divine, and you don't, there's no way in. There's absolutely just no way in. And at this point, it's every organized religion has its own fundamentalism to such a degree that that the problem begins to be organized religion as it now is constituted.
Well, where I slightly disagree with you is I don't believe that there's no way in. I actually think it's the job of moderate and progressive religious leaders to make a way in, because all of our traditions are interpretive traditions. And so just as ISIS's brutality is a kind of manifestation of a radical interpretation of Islam, just as Jewish extremists are engaging in a sort of hyper-nationalistic religious ideology in the name of Judaism, so too our interpretive traditions can also be read as calls, for radical calls for love and justice and human dignity. And so I don't believe there's no way in. I believe this is the moment where we have to create, as Martin Luther King said, we have to make a way out of no way. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. I was just reminded by a dear friend, Rabbi Steph Colin, of a teaching of the great Rabbi David Ellenson, who said in response to the story of the binding of Isaac, when Abraham takes his son up the mountain to offer him as a sacrifice before God,
right.
Rabbi Ellenson said, if you hear God's voice telling you to harm another person, you have heard wrong. Look for the ram in the thicket.
Uh-huh.
Right? Now, and it's just as possible to read into that story from the book of Genesis that God calls us to sometimes gruesome acts, but they are done in the name of faith, and we should be soldiers of faith and fulfill God's word in even spilling the blood of our own children. Or you could just as easily read that as a statement of God does not want you to spill blood in God's name. Look for the ram in the thicket. And so what Rabbi Ellenson's doing is what I think we are all, as religious leaders today, called to do, which is seek out and find and affirm and articulate the interpretive tradition that calls us to deeper love and to greater acts of justice.
Right. I just want to footnote that for people who might not know what the ram in the thicket is doing there. But as he's about to kill his child, a ram comes out of the thicket and becomes the substitute sacrifice. Yeah. It also makes me think always of the great line from Jane Wagner and Lily Tomlin of when people talk to God, it's called praying. When God talks back, why isn't it called schizophrenia? But it is very true, because every tradition, many of its texts, Islam in fact is a violent religion. But also look at Leviticus, look at Exodus, with orders to bash the children of your enemies their skulls against the wall. Look at the Inquisition and the tradition of Christianity. To me, it's the externalizing of the sacred in each of ourselves and each other, and making it some third outside thing that then you have to appeal to, instead of taking responsibility for, you would say, interpreting, and I would say acting on, isn't it?
I mean, I think it's a choice. I think that there is a choice that has to be made when you take sacred text seriously about the kind of story that you are telling.
Right.
The way that we tell all of our sacred stories determines the way that we live and engage in the world. And it is a choice to read violence and hatred from our sacred texts.
Yeah.
And it is a choice to read revolutionary acts of courage and love from our sacred text. And all of that Homer, all the stuff of it exists there in the tradition. And the question is, what kind of Jew are you going to be in the world? What kind of Muslim? What kind of Buddhist? What kind of Christian are you going to be? What are you going to do with the material of this tradition? And how are you going to engage? And by the way, this is also true for people who have no faith tradition at all. We have radical choice. We can choose the way that we behave and live in the world. Will we choose a path of violence and hatred and narrow-mindedness, or a path of inclusiveness and deep understanding? For all of us, we live with that kind of choice right now.
Yes. And for me, women like you, and not just because you're clergy, but women like you are, for me, the answer, because just recently we lost the great Fatima Mernissi, who had done with the Hadiths and with the Quran precisely the kind of interpretation that you're talking about, and has done it for years, and she died recently. Excuse me. And you, and the kind of leader that you are, you see these things as with a complex and principled eye. And I know also that you've taken enormous hits from both outside and inside some parts of the Jewish community for your own stands on the complexities in Israel, on political stands and so forth. How are you holding up? Is the right wing folks still after you?
Look, I'm doing okay. I mean, I think at this point, if we don't use our voices to speak out for what we believe in, then we're not doing our job in the world. And as one of my friends, Pastor Michael Ray Matthews, said just the other day, he said, at a certain point, you have to choose if you are a chaplain to the empire or if you're a prophet of the revolution. And
nice.
and I mean, I think about that all the time. This is a decision that we have to make. So I'll give you an example that connects to the holiday of Hanukkah, and as long as it's a solstice show.
Correct.
But as we look, it's this beautiful, sweet tradition of lighting candles and bringing light into dark places. But it's actually a very complicated tradition, because it is also a narrative that carries with it a certain measure of brutality and extremism. It started off as a quest for religious autonomy from an oppressed minority. Right. But that oppressed minority, once they gained power, turned into its own brutal force.
Yeah.
And now we all know that. I mean, this is now spoken about in the community, but there's a choice about how we receive and how we tell that tradition to ourselves and to our children. Either you can totally ignore the brutality and the militarism that's connected to the story of Hanukkah and focus on presents and light and dreidels, right? Which is what a lot of people do. Or you can totally embrace the militarism and the extremism, and you can claim that Jews are as powerless today as we were in the time of the Maccabees, who needed to fight to the death for their freedom. Yeah. Or you can hold a very complicated understanding of what what that tradition is, where you affirm the uncomfortable truths of the human experience, which is sometimes really good intentions, like fighting for religious freedom, has really devastating outcomes. The people who were oppressed sometimes become oppressors. Sometimes there's incredible human cruelty even in our heroes.
That's true.
And there's also beauty and magnificence and light and purpose that can be brought from the same story. My version, when I say we have to make a choice, the way I want to engage our tradition and the way I do engage our tradition is to actually push people to hold that kind of complexity, to be able to own what's challenging and problematic and broken from our past, and also affirm what's incredibly beautiful and life-sustaining from our past, so that we don't make the same mistakes that were made before as we now push our way into the future.
Yes, would that everybody were like you. I mean, I really and take a minute and bring us up to date about ICAR, which is the leading edge Jewish community in Los Angeles that you co-founded, and that is inspiring people in a way that are alienated by conventional religion. Talk a bit about its development.
Well, Robin, I would love to have you come out and visit us if you're ever here in Los Angeles. But the idea really is that as religious practitioners today, our job is really to do an act of sacred excavation. We have to uncover what the prophetic voice is in all of our traditions. And in Judaism, that prophetic voice very clearly calls us to stand for justice and for dignity for all people. And we do so with a whole heart, with incredible joy, with really sincere practice. And so we're trying to reclaim the heart and soul of Jewish prayer life again, moving away from a kind of perfunctory, soulless engagement to a really heart-filled and very thoughtful and justice-driven engagement. So the prayer services are really designed to they move from the contemplative to the ecstatic, but we want people to feel something again. We want to crack the heart wide open so that we can rediscover what the prophetic call is in our tradition, and then go out as warriors for justice and for peace in the world. And so we really see an intimate connection between the work of the Spirit and the work of justice in the world, a kind of nurturing of the Spirit that happens on Shabbat, on the Sabbath, as we remind ourselves and re-engage in our own deepest dreams and aspirations for ourselves, our families, for the Jewish people, and for the world, and then fuel us to go out into the world and actually work toward the achievement of that vision. And it's a really beautiful community here, inclusive and wholehearted and open-minded and very deeply engaged in the most challenging issues of the day.
Wonderful, Sharon. Give the
and
web.
It's fun.
Give and it's fun. Not to be sniffed.
And we like being together, and the music's incredible, and we love opening our hearts together.
Tell the website for people who might visit or are in the LA area.
So it's ikar-la.org, ikarla.org.
We're coming into the longest, darkest night of the year. That is the winter solstice. But on the other side of the planet, at the same time, it's the summer solstice. And there is a complexity to the way that light comes and goes, much less the politics that we're facing. So after we live through the longest, darkest night of the year, we turn toward the light, and I'm hoping that this is a part of it. I wish you a joyous solstice and a happy Hanukkah, and thank you for what you're doing and for being with us again on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much, Robin. What a joy.
We need to take a break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be back in just a second or two with a story about a most unique guest. So stay with us.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again. My next guest, well, she's a story, as it turns out. Despite repeated frustrating attempts to interview by phone this guest, the Venerable Dhammananda, the international lines to Thailand simply weren't clear enough to record. But hers is just too important a story to give up on. So I'm going to tell that story instead, augmented by research about her and by email correspondence with her. Born Chatsumarn Kabil Singh, Dhammananda is Thailand's first and most senior Buddhist female monk ordained in the Theravada tradition. She's the abbot, notice I said abbot, not abbess, of Songdhamma Kalyani Monastery, the only temple in Thailand where there are Bhikkhunis, or female monastics. She is also a university professor in philosophy and Buddhism, a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, a published author, and a former TV host. She's considered a Buddhist modernist writer along with Thich Nhat Hanh and the 14th Dalai Lama. Her monastery was established by her mother, Thailand's first ordained female monk, or bhikkhuni, that's the word for female monk, and it is the only all-female temple in Thailand. In Thailand, women can become white-cloaked nuns, maiji, but in most temples they are treated routinely and dismissively as domestic servants, those nuns. Thailand, however, has some 100 bhikkhunis who were ordained in Sri Lanka, where women are allowed to become monks, but they and their monasteries are not legally recognized at home in Thailand and don't receive state funding and other support that the country's 200,000 male monks do get. In fact, for female monks to be fully ordained and to practice can bring fines and even imprisonment. Some Thai Buddhists believe women are inferior beings who must perform extra good deeds to ensure that they will be reborn as men in future lives. Ironically, or maybe expectably, that same male Buddhist establishment has been shamed recently by exposure of crimes quite similar to sexual abuse and Vatican financial scandals in the Roman Catholic Church. Monks in Thailand have been convicted of murder, wildlife trafficking, and sexual assault. A former abbot, a fugitive now, faces charges of drug use, money laundering, and fathering a child by an underage woman. The Supreme Sangha Council, the religion's ruling body, is under fire over mishandling of corruption allegations against prominent abbots, including one of its own members, allegations that include embezzling funds and the investment of $1.2 million U.S. from donations into the stock market. Keep in mind, these are the same monks who forbid female monastic ordination because, as some of them say, women will stain the sacred monastic robe with menstrual blood. Such stigmatization of women led to the demise of the order of Bhikkhunis in Thailand, where the order is said to have ceased somewhere between the 11th and 13th centuries, but the line was kept intact in China. It ceased in Thailand, that is, until Dhammananda's mother came along. Now, that remarkable woman, the Venerable Voramai Kabil Singh, born in 1908, was a writer, a poet, a novelist, and a teacher. During World War II, she married a member of parliament from the southern part of Thailand, but when her daughter, Chatsumarn, was born, she moved back to Bangkok because she was worried about the quality of education for a girl child in the south. While back in Bangkok, she became curious about meditation, and she began to study Buddhism directly from the texts, with no male monks interpreting. She started publishing a Buddhist monthly magazine in 1955 and kept it going for 32 years. She took her first ordination in 1956 and then, in 1971, in Taiwan, became the first Thai woman to take full ordination as a bhikkhuni. She established the Songdhamma Kalyani Monastery. So perhaps it's not surprising that her daughter, now aged 71, is a rebel who whizzes around the compound on her motorized scooter wearing bright orange monastic robes. But that daughter didn't always have a vocation. In fact, she admits, I pushed against it as much as I could. Instead, Dhammananda, who was then called Chatsumarn, went to university, married, had 3 sons, and embarked on a successful 30-year academic career, later even hosting her own TV show. Then one day, she writes, it was in the year 2000, and I was sitting in the makeup chair about to do my TV show. It was nothing unusual, and in fact, I quite liked to wear makeup. But on this day, I looked at my reflection and I thought, how long do I have to do this for? Suddenly, it just didn't make any sense. It was a turning point. She embarked on training, full training as a bhikkhuni, to be able to train others after her. The first decade of her ordained life, she focused on educating the public by using her media experience to bring out books, brochures, tape cassettes, and so forth, so that Thai society could become informed about the rightful heritage of bhikkhunis, women monks, back from the Buddha's time. Her version of Buddhism is one that's socially engaged in addressing the world's suffering, especially that of women. She and her female monks follow the examples of bodhisattvas, working for the benefit of one's happiness and others. She openly calls herself a feminist, and simply by existing, Songdhamma Kalyani Monastery plays a major role challenging sexism in Buddhism. And it has inspired women on both national and international levels by forging a community, or sangha as it's called, and training hundreds of aspirants, including a former Google executive, a Harvard graduate, journalists, doctors, and village noodle vendors. Just several weeks ago, Dhammananda ordained almost 50 new bhikkhunis. History is written by men, about men, for men, she writes. So we start to write a story about women, from a woman's story. That's a different voice. As for the social contribution of the Sangha, she adds, within the limits of Vinaya, the monastic order, there's a lot we can do. While hoping to transmit Buddhist teachings to the public, we support individual cases as best we can, for instance, providing the means for a young woman's education or providing shelter to young mothers. Our Sangha, she goes on, is active in prison outreach, notably women's prisons and juvenile detention centers, Dhamma talks, teaching teamwork, teaching massage techniques. We try to improve their living conditions. We share surplus from donor supplies, like shampoo and soap, with the inmates. We have visited female inmates at the provincial prison for the past 3 years, offering Dhamma courses. The most recent one, 350 of them enrolled and got certificates from us. Some, once set free, returned to start a new life by asking for temporary ordination, and they stayed with us. Then they feel stable to return to society, empowered by positive energy. They also do environmental activism, her monks. We try to set a role, she says, a role model for the public to be aware of the need to recycle. We encourage them to bring their paper and plastic waste to offer as merit-making. They become aware that they should minimize and separate their trash, and we compost and return leftover food to the soil, so in the long run, the soil is more fertile. We set up a small city farm to encourage visitors to grow vegetables even in limited space. And health? Well, we now are planning to open a clinic every Sunday afternoon to provide for health care and information for free for all. Now, regular listeners to this program know how frequently I rage about organized religion and its role in fostering violence. Not only the rise of Daesh or ISIL or Christian fundamentalists attacking women's health centers, but also Messianic Jewish settlers assaulting Palestinians, Hindu fundamentalists turning violent, and even, yes, Buddhists attacking Muslims in Burma. Well, Dhammananda is quite open about religions failing to meet their own supposed standards of ethics. As for gods, she scoffs gently, quote, "Not to kill in Christianity, they take it as an order from God we ought not kill. But in Buddhism we do not have such a God concept. When we bow down before a Buddha image, it is only to symbolize we are able to let go of the importance of self by bringing our head below our heart." As for organized religion, as she puts it, structural suffering is caused by human beings in the end. So think collectively. She's also clear about Buddhism needing major reform. "I know there's resistance out there," she notes. "It's not my intention to stick out and provoke anybody. I try to honor everyone. I try to be a Supatipano, a female monk with good conduct. Time will tell." She adds, "I would be satisfied if I could serve as a refuge for women. I am not aiming at a big market. I don't think Thai women will rise up and get ordained en masse. A monastic path is not a comfortable lifestyle. I'm thinking of a small religious community which helps women develop their own spirituality and contribute to society. Another alternative for women." At times, she says she's received more understanding from the West than from her own countryfolk, who then try to use that against her. But she responds that, quote, "Westerners shop around and finally make the choice to be Buddhist. When you're thrown into it by birth, it's hard to appreciate. So I won't be surprised if in the end Buddhism is greater in the West." Her sense of humor shows itself wryly. "Every moment," she says, breathing in and out, "this is the practice. To talk to people and maintain equanimity, to talk to my students without getting frustrated. This is practice. Practice is one day at a time and one moment at a time." The monastery does do trainings and has a website for more information on it. It's www.thaibhikkhunis.org. That's www.thaib, as in beautiful, HIKKHUNIS.org. THAIBHIKKHUNIS.org. Dhammananda's last two comments that I'll leave you with are, "I'm just a small crack in the wall of patriarchy, the wall of hierarchy, the wall of injustice. Soon there will be more cracks, and someday the wall will fall. Everything," she says over and over again, "everything begins with a heart." Time for another break here. I'm Robin Morgan. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'll be right back with a guest who sees the connections between feminism and free thinking at the same time she fights for the separation of church and state. So don't you go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again. And I'm about to welcome back again Laurie Gaylor, who has been a guest on the program before. She is the co-president and co-founder of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which is particularly needed right now. Here is Laurie. Laurie, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much.
Well, this is becoming an annual event.
Reasons greetings. Reasons greetings.
Yes, reasons greetings. I love that new one from you folks. Never before has the Freedom from Religion Foundation been more needed in this country, and I would argue the world, because we seem to be awash in gods and guns, both in terms of Islamic fundamentalism and the so-called would-be caliphate Daesh, and at home with the assassin at the Planned Parenthood clinic and all the religious right. How is FFRet dealing with all of that? Are you feeling besieged?
Well, we think that the only way to achieve true peace on earth and goodwill to all, including women, is to keep religion and government separate, and we are just working as hard as we can to do that and to educate about how important this really original American principle of separation between church and state is. And we just saw the anniversary of the Bill of Rights on December 15th.
Right.
And we think that's something that we should celebrate the birth of. And Gail Collins had a recent column in the New York Times where she pointed out, unfortunately, that there's a heck of a lot more concern for gun rights in this country than for women's right to abortion.
Yes.
And it is very dismaying, but we just have to carry on.
Yeah. No, Gail is a friend and has been a guest on the show, and that's a refrain, a signature chord that she keeps striking, because the centrality of owning women's bodies and fertility, and therefore the means of reproduction, is absolutely the cornerstone of patriarchy, which expresses itself most continuously, cross-culturally, in organized religion, and this is a really scary time, the assault. And it's not surprising that the major assaulters against women's reproductive rights are, of course, God told them to do it. Whenever anybody has a direct line to some God who tells them, "Hey, go out and kill folks,"
watch out.
Yeah. You got real problems.
And the Freedom from Religion Foundation really wouldn't exist were it not for originally the original religious war against women's reproductive rights in the 1960s and 70s, and that's really what opened my mother's eyes, and my eyes tailing around after her in junior high school, to the fact that we should never have religious dogma in our government, that if we want women to be free, we have to have the separation, and that we would be fighting this forever if we have religion and government. And
right.
Unfortunately, we are seeing the ramped up war, not just against abortion rights, but contraception. We are going backwards on that one.
Right.
But I think that most Americans are pretty firm that they believe in contraceptive rights, and this is the fundamentalists and crazy religious right politicians.
Right. Well, I mean, and I should say also that your mother was one of our great ones, and we lost her this year, but she was campaigning for women's reproductive freedom and rights up to the very end, and she will be much missed. She was a great lady.
And she was founder and administrator of the Women's Medical Fund, which is the longest-lived abortion rights charity in the country, and we've helped more than 20,000 indigent women or women without means pay for abortions here in the Wisconsin area. And she was taking those calls at 88 right up almost into her death.
Yeah.
And we are continuing it and helping women. And we shouldn't have to have a fund like this. The cutoff of Medicaid assistance to abortion is entirely religiously motivated. Representative Henry Hyde at the federal level was an arch Roman Catholic, and 36 states cut off that funding, and it's cruel, and women have the right to exercise their constitutional rights regardless of their income.
Yes, of course they do. I mean, it's so interesting, the connections between that feminism, in effect, was what really brought you to being a free thinker, because there's a new a new assault even within the atheist community. I don't know if you've heard about this yet, but some of the feminists online are all abuzz about it, about profoundly sexist statements by Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, probably two of the most prominent atheist authors around. Let me make your day and make your teeth grind, because Dawkins had a while ago, a year or so ago, made some. 2011, I think it was. He did an open letter called "Dear Muslima," in which he essentially argued that because women in Muslim countries suffer from sexist mistreatment, and that's serious, then women in the West shouldn't speak out about sexist mistreatment, sexual harassment, sexual assault, physical intimidation in the global North. So, and there was also a hit at women who advocate anti-sexual harassment policies. So he took a number of hits about that, and he eventually did, in fact, apologize. And on stage at a conference in Oxford last August, he said he was a feminist and everyone else should be too. So everybody, relaxed. Then Sam Harris, another prominent male atheist, actually not only but wore his foot in his mouth. He was asked during an interview why he thought most atheists were male, which itself is a ridiculous question because I would argue that's not true. Anyway, he answered, quote, "There's something about that critical posture in atheism that is to some degree intrinsically male and more attractive to guys than to women. The atheist variable has this it doesn't obviously have this nurturing, coherence-building, extra estrogen vibe that you would want by default if you wanted to attract as many women as men." Well, then women got a little, cranky about that. So he wrote a long blog post saying, "I'm not the sexist pig you're looking for," digging himself in even deeper by claiming that women had no sense of humor. Every cliche in the book. He knew he was a feminist because he had 2 daughters, and his editors had been women, most of them, and also women had an inherent desire to sacrifice themselves for second-class status, and he put women on a pedestal, saying that he respects women more than men. Anyway, get worse. At which point, and then I'm done with these boys. Dawkins seemed to, with Harris's comments, he seemed to gain strength again and retreated from his apology and attacked the women who had criticized him, saying they were witch hunter lynch mobs, and that rape victims, just for good measure he threw this in, should not be considered trustworthy if they had been drinking. So this, I think we need to send each of these men copies of your wonderful book, which shows the absolute indissoluble connections between feminism and atheism and the great feminist leaders down through the ages, all of whom have been free thinkers. Don't you think we need to send them corrective homework?
Well, yeah, I thought they would have known about them, but
not enough.
The feminist movement in this country, of course, was sparked and nurtured and largely initiated by the free-thinking women like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and joined by many people who are not as well known as her today.
Right.
And her faithful coadjutor was an agnostic, Susan B. Anthony, maybe not as passionate, but Elizabeth Cady Stanton, boy, do we owe her a debt.
Yes.
She wrote the suffrage amendment that she never got to see pass, and first to call for a women's vote, and she was a revolutionary and concerned about women's rights to their own bodies, marriage, divorce questions, and all of that. She'd still be radical today, wouldn't she?
She would absolutely be radical. She would put a number of current-day feminists to shame. They would have to snap to equal her intellectual, fervor. Say the name of the book, which I plug all the time happily because it's a wonderful book, listeners. If you haven't read it, you should get it immediately, and you can get it from the FFRF website. Give the website and the title of the book.
It's the website is ffrf.org, Freedom from Religion Foundation, abbreviated, and it's the first anthology of women freethinkers. It's called Women Without Superstition, and the subtitle is No Gods, No Masters, which was the slogan of Margaret Sanger, that woman rebel.
And it's a big, wonderful, thick volume, and it's filled with stuff you didn't know. The riches that you discover, the things you learn are just really, and wonderful arguing tools are in it as well.
It's women of the 19th and early, mostly 20th centuries, and I'm working on one for the 21st.
How great
There's
is that?
There's so many wonderful women to choose from.
That is terrific. Now, take a minute and tell, we never have enough time, but take a minute and tell us about what FFRF is doing, the latest doings, because I know you're fighting legal battles and you're fighting on so many fronts.
Well, we've won 5 lawsuits this year, including removing 10 Commandments in front of a junior high school in Pennsylvania. We just got a preliminary injunction to stop a live nativity, 20 minutes of children enacting the story of Jesus while the Bible passages are read. And this is in Elkhart, Indiana, and the whole town is up in flames over this, and we are protecting a student, and they're out trying to out the family that is suing. And so it's very divisive to have religion in the schools, religion in government. It causes nothing but divisiveness and creates walls between children, and also lets those religious people think they can boss the rest of us around.
Right.
And when we have someone like Ohio Governor John Kasich running for president and ignorantly saying that our rights come from the Bible.
I mean, he should know better.
The Bill of Rights.
He should know better.
Yes, we are really dealing with mountains of ignorance, and we need to honor this nation's secular roots and honor reason. And we have a slogan. It was my mother's slogan at this time of year, at this season of the winter solstice, may reason prevail.
Yeah, that's a lovely one. And these folks should, go back and actually read the words of the framers, who themselves were free thinkers and secularists, and they knew what they were doing when they separated church and state. They knew what they were doing when they made a secular country. The good news, which I will leave us with, is that slowly but surely, despite God's guns, violence, and crazies, and patriarchy, is that the latest Pew report shows that close to 24% now of the American population declares itself secular or unaffiliated with any religion?
Yes, it calls itself non-religious, and a third of young people. And so we are kind of catching up with what happened in Europe. We are finally becoming a more secular nation, and more of us are agitating, and we run across violations of church and state. More people are complaining, and it just hasn't caught up with the politicians. Yes,
well, that's encouraging. I mean, then the politicians will then eventually have to catch up with us, especially the youth demographic. That 1/3 of American youth is secularist is very encouraging for the future.
They're going to have to start courting the secular vote, and that will be a great day.
It will be a great day. And you and Freedom from Religion Foundation, which is ffrf.org, have done a great deal to make that possible, and still do. Thank you,
thank you,
and
Robin.
a very happy solstice and reasons greetings.
And Happy New Year. Thank you.
We have to take one last break here. I'm Robin Morgan with Women's Media Center Live, and I'll be back in just a moment with some fighting words about reclaiming the solstice from the longest dark night of the year.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again with some fighting words. We're about to have a new year. Much of the Western world greets it in January, much of the East in February. Jewish, Muslim, Wiccan, and other observances fall at differing times, but whenever it's welcomed, a new year vibrates both nostalgia and renewal. It's another chance, a fresh start. Revolution, like evolution, sometimes seems a matter of patient, stubborn pump priming, year after decade after century, with no result but a dry, grating noise, until suddenly a miraculous trickle appears. But history is not only a continuum of effort and result, it's also the microsecond in which we poise right now, when we can look backward at centuries of foremothers' effort and forward at the rest of this young century, young millennium, a gleam in young feminists' eyes. From such a perspective, one brief year appears poignant and frail. Yet long before Einstein grasped that time and space were the same thing and that both were relative, the Aboriginal peoples in Australia were quite familiar with the dream time as a primeval, vital, ongoing reality, more tangible than arbitrary clocks and calendars. In fact, time is an illusion, or maybe a chameleon. Think how irrelevant time is to lovers lying in each other's arms, and how crucial it becomes to them when they're apart. Think of the woman whose disability makes the act of getting dressed in the morning an hours-long, tiring procedure. Think of the lifer in prison, or the African-American who, even if she can afford a taxi, winds up taking longer to get home because no cab will pick her up, since she might be going to a community which has been forced to exist and then feared as a ghetto. Time might move swiftly or stand still for the blissful artist at her palette, but how interminably slowly it sifts for the homeless woman who's haunting the bus station late at night, or the young girl awaiting a food truck in the refugee camp. Consider the perception of time felt by a child in response to the sentence, "I'll be with you in a minute," when uttered by a grown-up, or the varied impressions the same sentence evokes when spoken by the clerk at the unemployment office, or your teenage daughter finishing a phone call, or a desk sergeant at the precinct's rape squad, your bank's loan officer, the nurse who brings the painkiller. And what about, "Speak more slowly, I can't understand you," snarled at the new Latina immigrant, or "Hurry it up there," to the old woman making her slow way with a metal walker on an icy sidewalk. For most women, time is experienced as an utterly different reality than for most men. A woman anxious for a late period to start feels time creep with excruciating slowness. A woman just diagnosed as having breast cancer senses time blur into alarming speed. And what about the woman in her 16th hour of labor contractions, or the welfare client whose days are measured by the length of lines in which she stands waiting? A female life also flows in overlapping activities. We invented multitasking, so she simultaneously cleans up breakfast while lacing the 6-year-old's shoes, while keeping an eye on the toddler, while answering the phone, while mentally plotting that the freelance assignment is due back by 2, stuff at the cleaners won't be ready until 4, the bank closes at 3, carpool kids need fetching from school by 3:15, the casserole requires 45 minutes to bake, and so on, and so on. Such a person has a very different concept of time from the corporate executive whose neat, linear day is compartmentalized into appointments guarded by his secretary. Studies of leisure time note this difference, in fact, though this is changing. Most men still spend leisure time watching or playing a ball game, reading the paper, schmoozing with the guys at the bar. For women, leisure time is an oxymoron, usually spent gardening, knitting, cooking, in effect, you might argue, producing more leisure time for men. How often, in any event, do you say, "But I don't have the time"? It reminds me of a 1960s rallying cry, "Seize the time." But it makes me wonder if a slogan for women in the 21st century might be, "Make the time." Another chance, a fresh start. The universe knows how to do it. Why not us? History is now as much as was and will be. Freedom's not a goal, but a process. So from the patient, stubborn luminescence in me to the journeying radiance in you, have a peaceful solstice as the planet turns and as we try to turn the world around to sanity. And that's it for today, and for the year 2015. After this solstice show, we're going to be on holiday hiatus until January 9th. But we will be back then, rested and ready to go, with some great guests and much, much more, some real surprises. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com, and there you'll find the show plus the archive of all our previous episodes. And we're at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and on Twitter. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Our founding sponsor is Regina K. Scully. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program is Julie Burton. And I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Have a peace-filled solstice and a happy new year. And don't forget to join us in January right back here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMClive.com. Talk radio with a brain.